Welcome back, fans of Building Aaronsburg.
We need to find a name for them. We'll take suggestions.
Yeah. I'm Thomas Aaronsburg,
And I'm Catherine Aaronsburg.
and this is our podcast, Building Aaronsburg. Last time we talked kind of very generally
Our origin story.
about kind of how this all started, and we kind of jumped around a lot. So this week, this day, whatever, however you're listening to this episode.
You're binge listening to these 10 in a row. So this is like an hour. This is like an hour after your first one. You've been binging
Yes.
them. That's how
Right.
you're listening to these. What are we talking about today?
What we're going to talk about is, in our last podcast, we kind of said we didn't really have a plan, and we were kind of figuring stuff out as we went along. And probably one of the very first things we figured out the hard way is that you should just always do it right the first time.
Oh, yes.
All right. So the first area of doing it right the first time, obviously, is with the home building. Right. We have done several projects where we did it either because we didn't know what we were doing or we thought it was cheaper or easier to do it a certain way. And then
In our defense, YouTube was not as good as it is now.
that's true. And Google, for that matter. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, we started in 2006. We started renovating a house in 2006.
I think YouTube started in like 2005 or something.
I don't know. There weren't very many
So-
videos, is all I know. And we didn't know where to buy materials. We were buying like second grade materials from places and and stuff like that.
Yeah, but I think a lot of that was because it was cheap. I mean, it was
it was what we could afford.
$3
It was what we could
foot
afford.
versus $1.50 a square foot.
Because, back to us not knowing what we were doing, I think, as I recall, I put like everything down on the house. Like not all my life savings, but a huge chunk of it was the down payment on this house, which left me nothing to really do any renovations.
Right.
So renovations were being done with the cash out of our pockets.
Right.
Which is fine. That's still how we do things to this day, actually. We don't take out loans. We don't do that kind of stuff. And that's how we are able to afford it and still have an affordable mortgage, and those are all details that we can talk about later too. But certainly we were looking for the least expensive way to do some of these renovations and make them look, the best that they could for the least amount of budget. Blogs were kind of just coming into their heyday at that point. Certainly not nearly as many of them as there are now. There wasn't Pinterest back then. Like all of these great ideas that were coming from home bloggers and people who had ideas on how to do things and had figured it out didn't exist then. And so we were those people who were figuring out, but we weren't putting it online because we didn't know what we were doing.
We were not proud of that work.
No.
Although we'll say some
we were proud of it
things
at the
we were
time.
proud of it. Yeah, and then you get a month or two down the road and stuff's already falling apart.
Yeah. And you start to realize, like, oh,
Yeah, like
this
we
wasn't
didn't
so
do
smart.
that right.
For example, the floors that we put in our very first
Yes.
house, we had purchased them
That's
from...
actually the first thing I have written down here is the floors we put in the very first house versus the floors that we did in the second house and the floors that we're going to do in this house.
Mhm.
We're going to make sure that they're done right because, I mean, to do flooring, you have to completely clear everything out of your house pretty
Mhm.
much and completely turn your life upside down just to do the floors. So it's not like it's something that you're going to come back to probably for
Right.
years.
Once it's done, it's done. So
Yeah.
do it right the first time, for sure. The other thing that I would say for this subject that we've discovered over time is choosing what projects you're going to do and how they're going to be designed based on living in a place for a while. So it always makes me recoil slightly when I see people doing renovations before they've moved into houses, because I don't think that you can truly do the right renovation without knowing how you're going to use that space first. And so I
Right.
think that that's something that we had done in the past where we renovated things and then we're like, oh shoot, we should have put a cabinet here or we
Right.
should have done this.
It makes more sense to have done it this way.
The layout would have made more sense that way.
Right.
And so, doing things right the first time isn't just the subject of building something correctly. It's also designing it correctly
Right.
to your lifestyle. And what I love so much about that is that I've taken that into my own business and my own career too, because I know what it's like to have things designed badly And so I try so hard to take into account how people live their lives and listen to how they use that space to design something.
Yeah, I would say that's something I never really even thought about. Even now, as you're saying it, in terms of doing it right the first time, being the design being such a big part of doing it right the first time. I mean, to me, it's material and when to do it and how to do it, but not necessarily like the pre-planning.
It's a multifaceted thing for sure, because I always say that design is the layout, and then all the pretty things that you put inside of it, or the style, the color that you choose,
Right.
all that type stuff. That's the style of it. But the construction materials that we were actually using for some of those projects that we did way back in the beginning, those were bad, um, not design choices and not style choices. They were bad material choices, which that's a thing too.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of
Well, and the
different
way that they went
facets.
down too. I mean, the whole gluing technique for floors, I will never do that
Oh,
again.
sure. Well, because we knew that the option could be to put plywood down first.
Underneath it.
So we haven't told you what we did in this house. This first house that we lived in, I think it had carpet everywhere pretty much.
Oh
This
yeah,
house was built, it
it
was
had
a
carpet,
ranch.
cats and dog hair and all kind of stuff
It
in
was
it.
a 1960s ranch style house, so you can imagine they're the same pretty much all over the country. It had wall to wall carpet, and I think it was original, if not, it had
It had to be. It was
maybe been
like that
replaced once.
Scooby Doo green kind of color.
Yeah, and blue. I mean, it was various different
Yeah.
colors, and so it all got ripped out, and so beneath that was a slab, a concrete slab.
Right.
And so, what do you do on top of that? Well, I wanted wood. I wanted a wood flooring because that's nice and it's fancy, and that's what I thought I wanted because I was 23 years old and I didn't really know what the options are. And so there's that place in town, which is an import store. It's called Southeastern Salvage. I still shop there to this day. I still buy materials from there, but I'm a lot more careful. But we bought these wood floors. They looked like Thomas always called them basketball
It looked
floors.
like a basketball court.
It was like um, un stained. I guess it was pine,
I thought they
oak.
were oak.
I don't know what they were. They look like a basketball floor. Very bright, light colored,
Long
floors.
strips.
Long, like maybe like 2-inch strips or whatever.
Right.
So we're laying these things all over in the house, and instead of doing the proper way, which would have been to lay plywood, a thin sheet
Well,
of plywood, and level everything up, and then toenail in with a floor nailer all of those pieces of
yes.
wood, we decided we would glue them down, and we didn't have any plywood. We glued these floors, these strips of wood, directly down
To the slab.
to the slab, which is like the dumbest thing ever because moisture can
That
still get
must
under
be a
there.
method, though. I mean, why else would they sell the glue and they sold the trowel? Like it was a whole thing.
We
Like
haven't
you
we
need the
haven't
glue and
gone
you need
back.
this trowel.
Yeah,
And
we haven't gone back and really analyzed because I'm sure there probably was a piece of plywood or some other prep to the surface that we didn't do. But it didn't take
probably.
long before this flooring was popping up.
Right.
Bowing, which I'm sure was a moisture issue and humidity because we live in the most humid place on the planet. And so we knew within a very short period of time that this was a bad deal.
Right.
But, it's the IKEA syndrome a little bit, which is that you put this thing together and then you feel so proud of yourself for putting something together. I mean, we put 2,000 square foot of wood floor down,
Yeah.
and you step back and look at it like, we did this thing.
It looked when we first put it down, it looked really good. Like I remember thinking like that these whoever put these down, they were professionals.
They knew what they were doing.
And then it wasn't a few months and pieces were starting to slide out of place and there were
Right.
gaps.
Right. So I think not even just, what we're talking about here, which is doing things right the first time. I think too, it's even knowing what questions to ask and what research to do. And some of that just comes with experience.
Yeah.
And hopefully this podcast is providing you the information that you can just say, oh, I didn't even think about that. Let me go ask that question. Because I think that's like 90% of my battle at all times is not knowing what questions to even ask.
Right.
To not even know that even exists to ask a question about it. So,
Well, like again though, like you said, if we were to do that again today, like if we were just getting in the business today, you could go on YouTube and you would have found very quickly like the gluing technique. Either there's a more proper way to do it that we did not do, or there's a better way. Like don't do the glue technique works in these certain situations, but not in these others. And I would bet ours was not one of the situations it was supposed to
Mm-hmm.
work in. So,
And not even just YouTube, but like I said, the bloggers, and I mean, there's
right.
so many people that have put out so much great content about the actual ways to get this stuff done that we just didn't
Well,
have.
they have pictures and they have videos and
Yeah, we just didn't have that
reviews. Like people,
information.
people review the work that other people have done. And be like, oh, if you post a YouTube video about how to do it, there will be a comment later down like, no, at the 2 minute and 30 second mark, you did this and you should have done this
Right.
or whatever.
But I will say, as much as we're trying to defend the fact that we didn't know what we were doing, I still think that there's every mistake is valuable,
Yes.
and every mistake is teaching us something moving forward that we won't do again, and we'll know, and hopefully we
I think
can.
that's a big part of it too, though. You have to be willing to admit that that was wrong,
Yeah,
which we totally are. I mean,
yeah.
the evidence kind of speaks for itself, but I would bet that there are probably some people that can't even get out of their own way and swallow their ego enough to say,
Well,
no, that was right,
if there is anything
whatever.
that the last 15 years have taught me through all of these subjects that we're talking about on this podcast, family, building a business, building, renovating houses, is the humility of admitting you made a mistake.
Yeah.
I mean, we've learned that one so many
We've
different
made so
times.
many of them, we've gotten good at it.
Yeah, we've gotten real good at just dusting our little knees off and getting going.
So the second thing I want to talk about then is doing it right when it comes to you building your business and kind of the things you've learned along the way there.
Okay. Well, there's so many things with the business. I think when I started my business, I never in the world thought that I was ever going to hire anybody. I always thought that it would be just me. Always, forever and ever. And now I have 2 employees, which is not a ton. But man, hiring employees is just as nerve wracking as I ever thought it would be. But definitely rewarding too. And that means the business is growing. So that's a great thing. But so I think, like anything else, I had goals for myself,
Mm-hmm.
but not necessarily goals for the business, which I think has probably saved me a lot of heartache um, in the end from not, because I think when you make certain goals and they don't get met, there's a lot of disappointment that comes along with that.
Right.
I think the only things that I knew I wanted was to be able to stay home with the kids as long as they were at home before they went to school. I knew that I wanted to do something entrepreneurial. Honestly, my business has evolved, and I've tried to get out of the landscape business like 4 different times,
Yeah, I
as
know.
you know.
Yes.
So there was times where I was making baby clothes and selling them at festivals. There was times where I was, I still do sell stuff on Facebook Marketplace because that's just like my hobby and I love it. But
Let's
there's
not forget about the chocolate covered pretzels.
ooh, that was a good little
Those
side
are
gig for a minute.
so good.
I just I've been entrepreneurial for a very long time, as long as I can remember. And so I knew that I wanted to stay home and raise the babies and that I wanted to do something, but I wasn't sure what. And landscape has just kind of kept being the design, that just
Yeah, it
kept
kept
being
coming back
it
to
kept
it.
coming back. And so I
Right.
decided, okay, this is the thing I'm going to have to figure out how it's going to work for me. How do you, Catherine, talking to myself, because when you're in a business by yourself, you ask yourself a lot of questions. There's no one else to ask. I mean, I could ask you, but you
Right.
can't answer the question for me. So
No. Yeah.
ultimately, I'm the decision maker here. And so I would ask myself, how can you make this work for you? Because let me tell you, planting plans are not my favorite thing. And by not my favorite thing, I mean they are probably my least favorite thing. And I had gotten myself into a rut of landscape plans, and it was making me miserable. I hated it. I wasn't
Yeah.
able. It just made me so miserable. So,
But at the same time, it was making the most money. I mean, you would do one plan.
it made most financial sense, right? So I
Right.
was, I was making I was sewing baby onesies. I was in this baby mode and I had this design creativity brain to use and I had to get my hands on something. So I was making all these baby onesies. I had like designed all the packaging for them. I'd done all these things, arranged how they were going to be at the festival. There was different levels and like how my whole
Right.
table was going to be arranged. And I was making like $4 per onesie. which equates to
Well,
about
and the amount of time you put into making just one and designing one and
right, which equates to like 25 cents an hour.
right,
Meanwhile, someone brings me their landscape job and I do a planting plan and I make several $100s
right,
and it took me a couple hours time. So I'm going from 25 or 50 cents an hour to like 75 or $100 an hour. It's like, Catherine, you can't deny that that's figure it out.
right,
This might not be what brings you joy. You know how people always say that, find what you do as a hobby and then it'll become a business and you'll never work a day in your life. I'm not so sure about that.
Well, I think in some ways you've done that though. I mean,
I
you
think
like
now
to
I've done
you
that.
you like to be creative and you like to design things and style things.
And
It just
that's
didn't take the necessarily the path that you thought it would take.
right. And I think back to what I was originally saying, I made it work for me. I decided that I wanted to get into styling spaces more than the landscape, the plants, the actual naming of the plants that go into the space. I
Right,
wanted to get into the pretties. I wanted to get into the pillows and the accessories and the fountains and the things that fill the space that make you feel like your exterior space is an interior space. Okay, Catherine, so how do you figure out how to do that for people? How do you sell that service
right,
when no one's buying that service? They think you're a landscape designer. They think you're doing planting plans. How do you sell a service that you want to do but you're not currently doing? And so I started styling my own exterior spaces and filming it and
right,
putting videos on Facebook and YouTube, and people started watching them and they thought, "Oh, she does this." And I was only doing it for myself at that time, but I wanted more business doing that. So people started hiring me for that. I started getting more and more into the content game of creating content, which I enjoy because I feel like I'm teaching people. And that was such a struggle for me too. I would put my prices out there for my business and I would have people who couldn't afford me, but I truly feel like everybody deserves to have a beautiful exterior space and to love where they live. I just believe that. Sorry. I believe that everybody should love the space where they live. I think that we should all feel at home, and not want to just come home from work and either hate where you're living or immediately want to go out and spend your time somewhere else. I want you to love where you live.
right,
And so it was hard for me to see people that couldn't spend a couple $100. It's such a low budget to spend. My fees were eating into it. And so I thought, okay, well, this content, creating these videos, is a way for me to give them that content for free and teach them how to do this thing
right.
so they can do it for themselves and create that space they love and spend the money they could have spent on me and spend it on more, pillows or an outdoor table
Yeah.
or whatever, to create that space that I want for them to have, to create the happiness and joy. And so that's a niche that I've gotten myself into and developed over, I've been in business since 2008. So
Yeah, but what you're currently doing though with your business and your videos hasn't really been a thing, but maybe for the last 4 years, maybe
five, I
5.
would say, yeah, probably five. I think it was 2015 or so.
Right. So it took you seven
A very long
years
time.
to figure that part of it out.
Yeah. But, for the first part of my business, I was just doing CAD work, which is computer rendering, where a local landscape architect or a local person was handing off the drawings, the hand drawings that they did, and they were handing them to me, and I was putting them into the computer. And
Right.
so I was getting a few business, of my own business drawings that I was doing and sketches for people. But for the most part, I was really kind of piggybacking off of the success in the business that other local landscape architects had. And that was fine at that time because we had little kids at home, and that was enough to keep me my toe in the game, my toe in the field, and not lose, all my contacts and all that. And I was still making a little bit of money on the side. So that was enough. And I always equate it to like a seesaw or a teeter totter or whatever you want to call it. Scales basically,
Yeah.
where I was in the beginning heavy into the baby rearing age of things and light on the business, and then it tipped over to where all the kids are in school now, and so we're pushing the business so much more. um, and so as far as learning from failures and doing things right the first time, certainly there have been tons and tons of mistakes in between, but I do think that the overall philosophy from the beginning of I'm going to raise these babies and then we're going to figure it out as we go along. Clearly, making onesies and pretzels were not the
Yeah.
thing. And we've come out on the other side with a touch of landscape and planting plans, but for the most part, we're creating content, showing people how to style their spaces, showing people how to love where they live, and that brings me joy in my job that I didn't think that I was going to get back when I was first starting.
So that kind of brings us to our third topic, which is the kids, raising the kids. I mean, I would say if there's, other than in my own career, looking back, like, I could have done that differently. Raising kids is probably the one spot where I look back and it's dozens of things, probably weekly.
That we did wrong.
Yeah. I was like, oh, should have done it this other way.
Yeah.
I mean, the first one that really sticks out in my mind, and I'm sure you'll remember this too, is when our oldest child was in kindergarten. She brought home a report card and she didn't do well on it.
In kindergarten.
In kindergarten, I remember at first I was like, whatever, but then like I got myself worked up about it. And I
You
don't
were
know
the
if I was
only
just in a
one.
bad mood or what, but I like let her have it about not being able to read or something, or not studying. I don't know what it was, but
I think I probably took you off that ledge because you and I, that is one thing that we now agree on, I think.
no, I remember when I walked away from like, wow, she's in kindergarten.
Yeah. I think
And this
that's,
is like the report card didn't even have letter. It had letters. It didn't have
yeah,
letter grade, but it was like,
S and G,
yes.
good and
And
satisfactory.
she had mostly
N for non-satisfactory.
goods,
Yeah.
but one was like a satisfactory. I'm like, what are you getting satisfactories for?
Well, I do think that that's been a struggle with me too. The children's whole life is seeing them for the age that they are because we're with them every day
Yes.
and we see them. And so you look back at that and go, "Oh my gosh, she was in kindergarten, like she was so little."
Right.
But
Now,
when you're
I think when that particular incident, I remember
at the time, you
walking
knew.
away from it being like, what a jerk I am. Like, she's in kindergarten. She's
But I do think that we've also learned something that at least my parents didn't do with me, which is you make a mistake and then we go back and we talk about it. We go back and
right.
we apologize and we say, we we shouldn't have talked to you that way. We shouldn't have, mommy made a mistake. I'm sorry I yelled. I was upset. I shouldn't have, So like we're teaching our children that. I feel like I'm constantly justifying the bad stuff we're doing, but that's not how I feel
Yeah, of
about
course you have to.
it. So I
Right.
can sleep at night. Um, but yeah, that's and of course she's the oldest too, so she's the first
Yeah,
one. She's like the trial
yeah,
child.
she definitely is.
And then but then you do learn the thing that everybody says, which is so true, that every child is different, so different.
Right. Our four are definitely four completely different.
Yeah. Yeah. And how you can discipline them and what you can say to them and what they can handle and all those things. And so it's an exhausting job.
It is, you know, I coach football and we always have these themes every year. And a couple years ago, our theme was relentless. And I remember thinking, and I think I even told the players this one day, we talk about being relentless on this field. And I remember telling them, y'all don't know what relentless is until you try to raise kids. That job, that is a relentless job. Like,
Yeah.
you never get to stop.
Yeah.
You go to bed at night
You're so tired.
and you're hoping that they're going to stay asleep the whole night. And
Yeah.
I mean, even as a couple nights ago, one of them came in our room.
Yeah. Yeah, the
So it's
11-year-old.
it's not even,
Yeah, it never
you
ends.
don't even get to sleep. Even when you're sleeping,
Right.
they're still coming at you.
Yeah. And it's the kind of thing that I think I realized about 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know why it took me. I mean, our children were all born. We had all 4 of our children, and I realized after I came out of my pregnancy fog, because I'd basically been in a mommy pregnancy fog for like I don't even know how many years straight. I think I finally came out of it and realized that I will be their mother forever. I will always be worried or thinking about them, or it doesn't matter like how old they get. They can be
Yeah.
50 years old and they're away from me, and they could be driving down the road one day and get in an accident and get killed. Like, in that, the worry of a parent, never, they're always your child. You'll never escape
Right.
it. Not that you want to escape it. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that that's a realization that hit me, that we're not done. Once they hit, graduate high school or whatever, we're not done.
Right.
It goes on and on.
But I mean, they are in some ways you're done with them. I mean, that's kind of again, we say we didn't have a plan, but then as things started happening, we're like, yes, that's our plan. Is that we wanted to have our kids early
Mm-hmm.
so that we would be done having kids early. And
Being close together too in age.
right,
Like, once we started having them, that ball was rolling downhill, and we were
right
gonna have all of them
until we were done,
until we were done.
which we are,
I think.
unless God decides to hit the old smite button on us.
It would be smiting us.
But that they'll all kind of be out of the house, and we will still be relatively young, and that number changes every year. Young changes every year for us,
Mhm.
right? Because 20 was young, and now 30 is young, and
Uh-huh.
40 is going to be young.
Yeah.
But-
But the point being, we had them young so that we could travel with them and do things with them as a family when we weren't having to change diapers as we were on vacation.
Right,
And which, by the way, trips with children aren't vacations.
right,
They are family trips. Let's go ahead and establish that. I feel real hard about that one.
yes.
Very hard about that one.
But that's true. I
It's
mean,
100% true.
you're not enjoying yourself. I mean, the one vacation we had since we've had children was without children.
Yeah.
It's just me and you.
We've had one.
And
It was a life changer, wasn't it?
it was. It really was.
What did you think? Me.
You just got instantly sharper. You were a whole new person.
I was the person you married.
Yeah. Before all these kids ruined
I
it.
was the person that I was before we had kids, which was a very different person. I wasn't thinking
Not
about
very different, but just
less stress.
less stressed.
Well, my brain wasn't occupied
Right.
by what they were going to eat, 4 mouths to feed, diapers packed. Like, do we have wipes? Do we have all the things that they need to go on this trip?
Right. Where are we gonna stop? They need to take a nap. We gotta
Yeah,
get back
the
in
naps.
bed.
Lord, you live by a nap schedule when they're little like that. So
Right.
yeah, that was. Anyway, I forgot what we were talking about.
Well, so what we were gonna say, to finish your thought, was that they would all be done being raised.
we could enjoy
and we were
them as
young.
adults, which I
Right.
think that we'll love. I think there's so many people who love the baby stage of things, and I was fine with baby stage, but I truly feel like I'm going to enjoy our children as adults more. But you have to get them to that stage.
Right.
You have to get them to be the adults. And so I want to raise children who are adults that I want to hang out with. So what
Yes.
is the child that I'm raising that I want to hang out with as an adult? So that's
I think they're on the right path.
I think they're on the right path too, for sure.
Time will tell. The other thing too, and this is something that I thought of much later, but I never wanted to be that dad that was like the old dad that
Yeah.
couldn't go out and throw the ball with his kids or.
Yeah.
And I
Some people
remember.
don't have a good choice about that. Sometimes we have infertility issues and
Well,
things
sure,
like that, of
sure.
course, that you can't really do.
Right. I
You
mean,
would
and
have
again,
taken babies whenever you could have them.
I would
Let's be
have.
honest
I
here.
would have.
You love the babies.
I do love the babies.
You love them. So not only did we want to be to the age or of an age where we could still enjoy them as adults and travel with them freely and not feel like we're a burden on or a hindrance on travel, but also hopefully we'll have more money then too to do the things
Right.
that we want. Because school teacher and starting out designer ain't exactly a recipe for
Right.
lifestyles of the rich and famous. And so let's hit the struggle bus when we're young and the kids are little, and then try to enjoy it all together when more comes to us and we're a little older and we can all enjoy each other and the fruits of our labor of our life, basically.
If you'd like to watch us and not just listen to us, you could watch us on YouTube. And be sure to like and comment and subscribe.
Yep. We're building Aaronsburg on Facebook. We're building Aaronsburg on Instagram. And we're buildingaaronsburg@gmail.com if you want to email us questions, comments, or even stories about your construction process. But until next time, bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.
Oh, is that when we cut things out when you're wrong? I probably should review these subjects before we start talking about them.
I
So I get some
tried to
ideas.
get them to you, and I believe you are on this shared document.
Am I?
Well, let me hit this button right here and see what it says. No, you're not. So the second thing I want to talk about then is doing it right when it comes to starting a business.
Mhm.
And-
Oh,
Dog.
Teddy.